Marvel's new Fantastic Four movie might be the most openly conservative blockbuster that Hollywood has produced in years. I was stunned by it, not by the special effects, but by how unapologetic the movie is about themes we almost never see in mainstream films. Pro-life, pro-family, pro-faith. There's a theory, I first heard it from Michael Knowles, but others have said it too, that some of Hollywood's best movies end up being accidentally conservative. The argument is that good storytelling demands moral clarity, the value of life, and the importance of family. Usually with big films, you have to listen to a 15-minute analysis to connect all the dots, to make it fit into this accidentally conservative trope. Knowles did this a few years ago with the Barbie movie. But with Fantastic Four, you do not need an explanation. The conservative themes are not hidden. They're wide out there in the open. So the movie's been out for just over a week now, and I promise I'm not going to really give any spoilers. Anything specific I say happens pretty early on in the film. So the whole premise of this movie is the value of the unborn, and by extension, the value of family. In the opening scene, Sue Storm and Mr. Fantastic, Reed, find out that they're expecting their first child. There's this powerful scene where Reed builds a machine to see into the womb, and right there on screen, you see their unborn baby's head, his body, limbs. You see him alive and growing. This is cinematic pro-life imagery. They're not just talking about the baby as an abstract idea, but this film makes you see and feel that life inside the womb. Then the plot starts to take shape. An alien arrives, warning Earth about Galactus, a super being set on destroying the planet. The Fantastic Four crew head out into space to negotiate with Galactus, and Galactus lays down an ultimatum. He'll spare Earth if Sue gives him her unborn child. And that's where the film's moral dilemma kind of comes in. Reed and Sue refuse to give their baby over. All they have to do is give up their baby, and humanity survives. But they don't do it. The movie leaves zero doubt that the child is not just a clump of cells or a valueless little thing or a parasite. This is a child that is worth everything. Their refusal, and what they endure as a result, is the heart of this movie. News of their decision not to give up their baby gets out. The world is shocked and angry. Why not trade a child for everyone's lives? The pressure is on them to act for the greater good. All they have to do is hand over their baby and save humanity. If Fantastic Four believed in the slogan, all for the common good, and look, I went to St. Thomas in the Twin Cities, and that was our motto, all for the common good. I thought it was dumb then, and I think it's dumb now, at least in the way that, people now in the modern time think what that motto is, think of what it means. But anyways, if they lived by the modern idea of all for the common good, if they believed in that, then they would have caved. But this movie flips that slogan, at least the modern understanding of it, on its head. 10 years ago, I can almost guarantee that this film would have ended differently. Maybe Reed and Sue would have initially refused to give over the baby, but later on they would give in, hand over their baby, save humanity. The script would make giving up what you love most seem heroic. But that's not happening anymore. Instead, the movie draws a clear moral line. Family, and yes, even unborn life, cannot be sacrificed on the altar of some abstract common good. That child is invaluable. Reed and Sue love the baby that they have not even met yet so much that they refuse to hand him over, even to save the world. As Sue says in the movie, she will not sacrifice her child for the world. In Hollywood now, at least with this movie, family matters most. The unborn child matters most. And this movie is not just pro-life, this movie is also very pro-family. Reed and Sue are portrayed as a happily married couple, not angsty or distant with one another, but together and excited for and protective of their child. And I know I said earlier no spoilers, and I'm going to give a very brief one here, so skip ahead 5 seconds if you don't want to hear it. But in the end, the Human Torch risks his life to save his sister, his brother-in-law, and nephew. That's how seriously this movie takes familial bonds. And then there's faith. At one point in the movie, Ben Grimm, the big rock guy, walks into a synagogue, joining people who are praying together as a community as the world teeters on the edge. He's there to see his love interest. But, this religious representation is actually kind of done right in this movie. Faith is the lived identity of his love interest and not just a token insert, And apparently Ben Grimm in the comics is Jewish, but the movie could have easily skipped over that part. But they don't. That's a sign that the culture is shifting. At one point in Hollywood, including faith would have been a major risk. But now it's portrayed as an essential part of who he and who his love interest is. I mentioned before the theory that many movies are accidentally conservative. And maybe this Fantastic Four film is intentionally conservative, and if it is, great. Or maybe it just proves a point, that good movies are conservative because good art puts what's true, good, and beautiful front and center. When you make a movie about the universal values that everyone understands, the love for your unborn child, the importance of family, the value of community and faith, it naturally aligns with conservative ideals. Now, of course, there's a real push in the culture, and there has been for years, against life, family, and faith. The Democrat Party as an institution pushes for policies that weaken these traditional values. But here's the shocker, the elites that lead that charge actually live out the most traditional values in their private lives. It's one of politics' greatest ironies. College-educated liberals, one of the Democrats' key voting demographics, often have higher marriage rates and more stable families than less educated Americans. In fact, white liberals, as they push for less marriage, more abortion, and are less vocal about faith, they're more likely to get married, stay married, and go to church. In California, the global capital of progressivism, two-parent married families constitute 67% of families. That's 4 points higher than the national average in California. And it's not just me that points this out. Brad Wilcox, author of Get Married, he says that elites are marriage hypocrites. They say they're open and accepting of a wide variety of family formations, but when it comes to forming their own families, they're strikingly traditional. And that's because college-educated progressives know, consciously or not, that stable two-parent families are the way to a fulfilling, successful life, for themselves and for their kids. They preach one thing publicly, but in private they keep living out the pro-life, pro-family, pro-faith formula. After years of following whatever trend was hot, Hollywood, at least with this movie, seems to have remembered what everyone truly knows deep down. Life matters, family matters, faith matters. That's the order of things, and it's deeply rooted in Western culture, especially Catholic thought. There's the old idea of the hierarchy of love. It says our deepest obligations are, in fact, ordered. First, love for God, then love of self, and then love of neighbor. But there's layers to the love of neighbor. First is love of spouse, then your kids, then your parents, and then as you move out, you get to extended family, then fellow citizens, and finally, lastly, all of humanity. We all feel this order. Even if we can't name it or describe it, we inherently know that it's true. We care about our spouse and our children first, then our wider circle of family, and only then the world at large. For years, Hollywood and the political left have tried to invert that hierarchy. Put the world first, family last. Or at the very least, put them on the same level. The leftist idea is that, if you must sacrifice a member of your family for the greater good, you should. Fantastic Four had a chance, just by its premise to reinforce that leftist idea. But it didn't do that. Instead, it reinforced what people inherently understand. Family first, strangers second. That's what's true, that is what's good, and that is what's beautiful. When Hollywood embraces universal, inherent values, even unintentionally, the result is a story that speaks to everyone. That's the secret to good art. Life, family, faith. These aren't just conservative talking points. They're what makes us human, and that's what this new Fantastic Four movie gets exactly right.